Is it time to give in to Windows 10's upgrade nagging?
And hybrid tablets are hot, but should you be hot for them?
Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Adam Turner. I'm here with a man who wishes everything was measured on the diagonal, Alex Kidman. We're also joined once again by Macworld Australia editor Anthony Caruana. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys.
Alex, what's new in tech?
Optus has announced a tie-up with Uber that will see Optus 4G hotspots installed in 100 Uber vehicles in Sydney and Melbourne. The idea is that you'll hail your Uber, and once you're inside, you'll get sweet free data. The deal will also see Optus offer Uber drivers reduced price connectivity deals.
The FBI has finally given up on demanding that Apple help it crack open the iPhone of one of the San Bernardino shooters. After a 6-week showdown, the FBI gained access to the iPhone via the help of a mysterious third party and has declined to reveal exact details of how it beat Apple's security defences.
There's an Aussie competitor to Tesla's Powerwall, with the Redflow Z-Cell battery becoming available for consumers to use with solar or off-peak power. The Z-Cell's unique selling point is that you can fully discharge it without adverse effects. Many competing battery solutions have to quarantine away available power to avoid long-term problems.
Australian broadcaster SBS is dipping its toe into virtual reality with the launch of the SBS On Demand VR app, allowing users to view 360-degree videos. Designed to complement its stable of television shows, SBS's first VR video features chef Heston Blumenthal taking viewers on a behind-the-scenes tour of his Fat Duck restaurant in Melbourne. Alright, so guys, the FBI has decided that it doesn't need Apple's help to break into our iPhones. Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a thing. We don't, honestly, I don't think we actually know enough about what went down to give a real final, hey, this is good, hey, this is bad. In one sense, yeah, maybe a good thing in that there isn't this big legal precedent that says, yes, you've got to compromise security. On the other hand, we really don't know how they did it. Clearly, they're not going to tell Apple how they did it.
No.
And as such, it could well be that they've discovered some massive flaw that they know about. And the problem, of course, with an undisclosed flaw is that the FBI are theoretically, depending on which side of the missile you sit, the good guys, but not everyone is. And as such, you know, if they can find it, someone else can find it.
There's a couple of angles to this one, actually, guys. One is that usually when a significant flaw is found in a piece of software like this, it has to be registered in a database called the CVS, which is about critical vulnerabilities. So it remains to be seen whether the FBI will actually do the right thing, and if they've found a major vulnerability, actually report it, which is the thing most people tend to do if they're doing the right thing. The other side of this is that people have a pretty good idea of how they've managed to do this. The company that the DEA was working with on a similar case is called Cellbrite. It's an Israeli company, and it sounds like, based on some stuff that happened last week, this is probably the angle that they've taken, which is to remove the storage out of the iPhone 5C that's been part of this San Bernardino case, clone the drive a whole bunch of times, and then try to brute force each of the clones one after the other until you hit the right passcode to liberate the data.
Not exactly a subtle technique, then.
No, but also not a vulnerability that you have to report either.
True.
No, because and it was actually something that an Apple engineer suggested at one point during the investigation a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean,
if you want to do it, just do it the old-fashioned way.
Really, in that if people have been able to get physical access to your hardware, it's generally, in security terms, always been game over eventually. It's kind of just a matter of time. And in one sense, I guess we can be hopeful that that's actually the methodology they've used.
Yeah. As far as it being game over for this particular case, well, clearly in San Bernardino it is because the FBI has withdrawn their case. But the data that's come out today from I'm trying to find which organisation it was, but an organisation in the US called the ACLU has found that there are about 70 other cases or that are similar to the San Bernardino one, where the FBI is trying to use the All Writs Act to access devices. So it may be over for the one case in San Bernardino, which frankly the FBI cocked up from beginning to end. But it would seem that it's not the end of the entire matter.
So, Alex, you've been sampling all the tablets lately. What's got you feeling good?
Well, all of the current range of hybrid tablets, these are these tablets that are meant to have this strong productivity focus, are really good. They're very nice devices. I've been playing with the new 9.7-inch iPad Pro, and I'd imagine Anthony might have had a bit of a go on one of those as well. Samsung's just announced the Australian availability for its Tab Pro S device. It's its first Galaxy device with Windows 10 on board. And of course, there's the good stalwarts in this space like Microsoft Surface Pro 4. They're all really nice devices, but I'm still trying to work out exactly how big a market there is for these things, because whilst they're beautiful devices, they're very expensive.
Yeah, what do you think, Tony? What grabs your eye?
It's kind of interesting. My test of devices like this is the airport lounge test, and it's looking at what everyone's using in the airport lounges. And I noticed over the last 6 to 8 months in particular, the number of iPads in the airport lounges seems to have been falling away and has been usurped by Windows 10 style tablets, so the hybrid tablets with touchscreens and keyboards and that sort of stuff. So I think there's a shift happening in the market, and Apple's probably seen this happen, which is why they've gone first to the iPad Pro and now to the smaller iPad Pro. But I'm a bit like Alex. I'm kind of stuck with where I'd use it. I mean, I've got an iPad with just a regular iPad Air 2 with a keyboard case, and that's handy for a lot of things, but there's still stuff that I really need a proper computer for.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, especially on the Apple side of the fence. And we discussed this a little bit last week when we had Matthew Powell on, that Apple seems determined, and looking at their profit figures, it's not hard to see why. Apple seems determined to push down this path of saying, oh, look, iOS is kind of where our future is at. We still like macOS, sort of, but really iOS is where we're making the money, which is why we're doing the iPad Pro rather than doing lots of different models of MacBooks, because that line's kind of being cut down. And it's not hard to, look into the tea leaves of the future and say, well, at some point, presumably they're going to leave macOS behind and just say, yeah, Apple is iOS.
What's really frustrating, though, is they're dumbing down macOS in the process and making it feel more like iOS and turning MacBooks into big iPads, and that's not necessarily what, old school MacBook owners want.
Apple's profit numbers are pretty interesting to look at, and their sales numbers. I think the iPad Pro is a response to dwindling tablet sales. I don't think there's any doubt there's no doubt in my mind that that's what they're doing. They were expecting people to turn over their iPads at about the same rate that they were turning over their iPhones. Which was never going to
happen, because you rarely buy an iPad on a 2-year contract.
Well, this was the thing, but I don't think Apple kind of realised that early on. They kind of thought everyone's buying a new iPhone. They get one every 2 years because that's when the phone contract expires. They've been burnt now because the last lot of data I saw suggested that iPhone replacement has moved from about 22 months to about 27 months on average. So people are hanging on to their phones longer as well, which explains the falling iPhone sales. But the iPads people are hanging on to. There's plenty of people I know. My son's using an iPad 2. Plenty of people I know are running around with iPad 2s or even the odd iPad 1 if they haven't dropped it and smashed it. But there's people hang on to these things because they still work. And one of the things that happened in iOS 9 was that they made the iOS work better with some older devices. For a change.
They're running in the same problem that PC makers run into. There was a time when a computer that was 2 years old was a piece of junk. But not anymore. These days you can have a computer that's 3, 4, 5 years old even, and still might be happily meeting your day-to-day tasks, at which point, as you say, your hardware refresh drops off, recycle blows right out. They're happening the same thing. A 2-year-old iPad is not a piece of junk anymore.
But there's a bigger problem on the Windows side of things, although it's kind of true in the Apple space, if you leave aside the fact that Apple charges a premium for all of its devices, in that the new hybrid devices. So I mean, I've got a Tab Pro S in front of me at the moment and a Surface Pro 4. They're very nice devices, but they're $1,500 plus devices. They're quite expensive. Are they worth it? Well, they're very fast. They're very nicely built. I have no complaints on that score. But the reality for the average user is that they're probably more powerful than they need. Yep. They could get away with, a $200-300 laptop. Is it going to be, as pretty, as light, as fully featured? No. Is it going to do what they want it to do? Yes. And this is a big challenge across the whole industry to get people into these spaces. Some of these devices are brilliant, but they're priced at a point where, yeah, your business customers can probably justify them, heavy travellers can justify them, and those with a nice disposable income can justify them. But the big wide market is still probably going to keep on buying $400 laptops.
Yeah, I think you need to be a well-heeled, well-travelled executive, really. You are the obvious market for these things.
Yeah, look, let's not forget, Apple doesn't care about the bottom end of the market. It's not where they play. They're not interested in the sub-$1,000 notebook market, which, if you look at a lot of manufacturers, if the sub-$1,000 notebook market didn't exist, you'd wonder if they'd ever sell anything. But Apple, they're there playing in the premium end of the market with relatively high margins. They've got 190 odd billion US dollars in the bank at the moment. They can ride out the occasional bump in the road pretty comfortably. So I don't think they're terribly worried about the high end Surface tablets. I think where they're going to start to, I don't think that's going to bother them because they'll wait that out. What's interesting is, will they eventually succumb to the temptation of delivering a sub $500 device to the market?
So Adam, Microsoft really, really, really wants people to pick up Windows 10, don't they?
Pretty much whether you like it or not. Their pop-up notifications are just getting not just pushier, but also trickier. It's much easier now to accidentally click yes when you didn't mean to. More of this, do you want to upgrade now or do you want to upgrade tomorrow? And no options for, I don't want to upgrade at all. But what's really annoying is in the last few weeks, there's been a huge jump in people who claim, swear black and blue, they didn't click yes to anything and it's still upgrading. It's I think something Microsoft tweaked with Windows Update. So they're doing their absolute best to push Windows 10 onto even old computers that may not be able to run it that well or may not have every compatible component. They just don't seem to care. They want Windows 10 on everything.
Yeah, I mean, there's some small scale arguments to say that this is not bad strategy for consumers in terms of the security profile of Windows 10 versus, say, a Windows 7 machine, which might not be fully updated, but it still should be the end user choice without a shadow of a doubt. I suppose the other thing there, though, is we're getting perilously close. We're only a couple of months away from when Microsoft has to actually reveal what Windows 10 costs. Yeah,
they don't want to say, they said it's free till, July 29, but they don't quite want to say what happens after then, because they're basically just trying to scare/trick everybody into upgrading by then. I wouldn't be surprised if they then extend that deadline out. They're not going to turn around and then say, now it costs $200, because there's no way in hell that anyone who held out will then happily hand over $200. They're going to have to handle it a bit differently to that.
The thing is, though, I suppose, if you've held out to that point, are you holding out on a computer which was never going to run it that well anyway? And are they going to get you on the back end when that computer lets its blue smoke out and you go and buy a new one, which, let's face it, is most likely going to have Windows 10 on it anyway?
Well, that's what I recommend to people, is that if you've got an old computer, don't upgrade it to a new operating system, especially if you might have an old printer, an old graphics card, an old something that might not be the drivers. Just wait until you buy a new computer. Oh, what do you reckon, Anthony? What's your philosophy when it comes to upgrading old computers?
Yeah, look, generally I'd agree with you. The caveat is that today's computers, from a hardware point of view, are, the hardware we've got is way in excess of what we're able to actually do with it most of the time. Unless you're doing, some very high-end video rendering or image editing or something like that, or development, your computer can do a whole lot more from a power point of view than what you're able to do, what you're able to use it for. And I think that means when a new OS comes out, it's probably going to be okay. I mean, the old saying was that there was no CPU Intel could make that Microsoft couldn't slow down. I don't think that's the
Apple
case
can
anymore.
slow it down just as well.
Yes. But also, you might be relying on expensive video editing software, or you might be... Good example, my mother-in-law has very fancy sewing machines that are basically computers. And the old ones that she's got, we have to still run Windows XP in VMware on her computer, because or else she can't. You think DRM's bad in computers, you should see the DRM in the craft world. She can't use this old sewing machine unless she plugs in the special dongle to prove that she owns it and to use the special software, and it only runs on XP. Now,
Yep,
if
this
you
is
had the
massively familiar. I have
Yes.
relatives in the crafting space who do the same thing,
Same.
and who have to source compact flash cards because that's all they'll take.
Yeah.
And
Now,
yeah,
imagine
it's
how
hideous.
you'd feel if you're one of these people and you're perhaps a bit older and you know enough about computers to do what you need to do to the craft stuff, but maybe don't know as much about computers as we do, and you wake up one day and your computer says, "Hi, I'm running Windows 10, you're screwed." It's really not a good situation.
Look, it's kind of interesting. I must say that at one point I did a roaring trade getting rid of a whole bunch of old 4 meg CF cards to sewing machine operators, which was great when I was getting rid of a whole bunch. But it's interesting. Apple's just as guilty of this, and probably even worse, given their reputation for working with creative professionals. I've got some friends who are musicians who, whenever an upgrade, and sometimes it's just a point upgrade that happens, it's a 10.11.2 upgrade and things like that, where the music software that they use with synthesizers and other, pretty high-end and very niche devices just stop working because they change something very fundamental in the subsystem that deals with audio. And they get bollocks by it every time. And they're at the point now where I know a few of them have got machines running OSs that are 2 or 3 generations old, and they quarantine them like crazy from being able to get any sort of automatic update.
Because they're basically mission-critical devices at this point, and you can't just go whacking every new update on them and hope for the best.
Well, and the other thing is that they're not actually computers in their sense; they're appliances, and it'd be like getting a firmware upgrade for your toaster that suddenly renders it into a flamethrower.
The problem is you run that risk that, the classic nuclear weapons scenario where apparently a lot of that stuff, because it was built in the 70s or 80s, still runs on floppy disks, and you kind of can't get those anymore. Well, that just about wraps it up for another episode of Vertical Hold. Remember, if you've got any comments, hit us up in the comments section on YouTube, via Twitter, or the Facebook Vertical Hold page. And special thanks to our guest, Anthony Caruana, for joining us again on the show.
My pleasure.
Thanks for joining us. Remember, if you like what you hear, hit that subscribe button.